Imagine sitting in the cockpit of an aircraft that has never once failed its engineers. A machine so statistically perfect, the numbers say it simply cannot go wrong. Now imagine the pilot beside you has flown for 30 years through storms, through emergencies, through things that would break most people. And even he quietly leans over and says, he hates flying this thing. Not fears, hates. Because there is a difference between a machine that is safe on paper and a machine that feels safe in your hands. This aircraft is one, but not the other. And today, you are going to find out exactly why. To understand why pilots despise this aircraft, you first need to understand the world it was born into. The year was 1988. Aviation was changing faster than anyone could keep up with. Fuel costs were climbing. Airlines were bleeding money. Passengers wanted cheaper tickets. And engineers, brilliant, ambitious, relentlessly determined engineers, believed they had finally found the answer. Automation. The idea was simple but revolutionary. What if you could build an aircraft so intelligent, so self-aware, that it could practically fly itself? What if you could reduce the mental burden on pilots so dramatically that human error, the #1 cause of aviation disasters, became almost impossible? That dream gave birth to the Airbus A320. And on paper, it was nothing short of a miracle. When Airbus unveiled the A320, the aviation world stopped breathing for a moment. This was not just a new aircraft. This was a statement. A declaration that the future of flight would be defined not by muscle and instinct, but by computers and code. The A320 was the first commercial airliner in history to use a full fly-by-wire control system. Gone were the traditional mechanical cables connecting the pilot's hands to the aircraft's control surfaces. In their place, digital signals. Electronic commands. A computer sitting between the pilot and the plane, listening to every input, every movement, every decision, and then quietly deciding whether to follow it or override it. Let that sink in for a moment. A computer that could override the pilot. Airbus called it the Flight Envelope Protection System. The logic was elegant. If a pilot, in a moment of panic or confusion, pushed the aircraft beyond its safe boundaries, too steep an angle, too fast a speed, too aggressive a maneuver, the computer would simply refuse. It would hold the aircraft within what engineers called the flight envelope, that invisible cage of safe parameters that no sane pilot should ever leave. The system was designed with the absolute best intentions. It was designed to save lives. And in many ways, it did exactly that. The A320 family went on to become one of the most commercially successful aircraft programs in aviation history. By the mid-1990s, hundreds of airlines across the world had placed orders. By the 2000s, it was everywhere: short-haul routes, budget carriers, major flag carriers. Today, there are over 10,000 A320 family aircraft operating globally. It has flown billions of passengers safely across continents and oceans. The accident rate is genuinely, statistically, impressively low. When you board an A320, the numbers say you are in one of the safest tubes of metal ever built by human hands. So why are pilots miserable inside it? To answer that, you need to step out of the passenger cabin and into the cockpit. Because the cockpit of the A320 is where the dream of automation collides violently with the reality of human psychology. And that collision, quiet, invisible, never reported in headlines, has been creating a slow-burning crisis inside the aviation industry for decades. The first thing experienced pilots notice when they transition to the A320 from older aircraft is the sidestick. Traditional aircraft use a center-mounted yoke, that familiar steering wheel-like column that physically moves, physically resists, physically communicates the aircraft's behavior back to the pilot's hands. On the A320, that yoke is gone. In its place sits a small, almost delicate joystick mounted to the side of the seat. It looks like something from a video game, and crucially, it does not move. When you push it, it sends an electronic signal to the computer. The computer interprets the signal. The computer moves the aircraft. And your hand feels nothing in return. No feedback, no resistance, no conversation between pilot and machine. Veteran pilots describe this as flying blind with your hands. One senior captain with over 15,000 flight hours once described the experience to an aviation journalist as like trying to have a conversation with someone who only ever nods. You speak. The aircraft responds. But you never truly know if it understood you, or if it is simply doing whatever it had already decided to do. And that uncertainty, that quiet, constant, exhausting uncertainty, is where the hatred begins. But the sidestick was only the first frustration. The deeper problem, the one that truly unravels pilot trust, lives inside the automation logic itself. The A320 operates across three distinct flight control laws: normal law, alternate law, and direct law. Think of it like this. Normal law is like driving a car with every safety assist fully active, automatic braking, lane correction, collision warnings, all of it working at once. Alternate law is like disabling half of those systems mid-journey. And direct law is the raw vehicle itself. No assists, no filters, just you and the machine. Each law represents a completely different level of computer involvement in the flight. Under normal law, the full flight envelope protection is active. The computer controls the boundaries. Under alternate law, some protections disappear. Under direct law, the aircraft behaves almost like a raw, conventional plane. Your inputs connect more directly to the control surfaces. The problem is that pilots never know exactly which law the aircraft is operating under, unless they actively check. And in a high-stress emergency situation, that ambiguity can be paralyzing. You are fighting a problem, your hands are on the sidestick, and somewhere in the back of your mind a single terrifying question is whispering, is the computer helping me right now, or is it fighting me? That question should never exist inside a cockpit. Early test pilots and instructors raised these concerns almost immediately after the A320 entered service. In 1988, just months after the aircraft's commercial debut, an Air France A320 crashed during an air show at Mulhouse-Habsheim in France. 3 people died. The investigation revealed a catastrophic confusion between the pilots and the automation, a situation where the crew believed the aircraft would respond one way, and the flight envelope protection system did something entirely different. The aircraft was not malfunctioning. It was doing exactly what it was programmed to do. But nobody in that cockpit fully understood what it had been programmed to do in that specific moment. The aircraft was working perfectly. The humans were lost. And that, more than any technical failure, more than any engineering shortcut, is the wound that has never fully healed in the relationship between pilots and the A320. Not distrust of the machine's safety. Distrust of the machine's intentions. Distrust, once planted inside a cockpit, does not stay quiet. It grows. It spreads through crew rooms, and simulator sessions, and late-night conversations between pilots who have spent years trying to decode a machine that was never fully designed to be decoded. And through the 1990s and into the 2000s, that distrust found fuel incident after incident, investigation after investigation, each one revealing the same uncomfortable truth. And the incidents kept coming with names attached to them. In 1992, an Indian Airlines A320 approaching Bangalore undershot the runway because the crew did not fully understand the interaction between the autothrottle and the flight control computers. The aircraft descended too fast, too low, with engines that were programmed to respond in ways neither pilot had anticipated. 92 people died. The aircraft was not broken. The logic was invisible. Then in 1994, a China Airlines A300, sharing the same Airbus fly-by-wire philosophy, stalled and crashed on approach to Nagoya, Japan. 264 people died. Again, the investigation found the same fingerprint. A crew fighting an automation system that was doing exactly what it was designed to do, while the humans had no mental model of why. These were not isolated accidents. These were a pattern. And the pattern had a name. The aviation industry has a term for what was happening. It is called automation surprise. It describes the moment when a highly automated system does something the pilot did not expect, did not command, and cannot immediately explain. In a conventional aircraft, surprises are mechanical. A warning light, a strange vibration, a shift in engine sound. The pilot's senses engage. The problem is physical, identifiable, traceable. But in a fly-by-wire aircraft governed by invisible logic and layered software, the surprise is intellectual. Something happened. You do not know why. And you have approximately 3 seconds to figure it out before the situation escalates beyond recovery. Automation surprise is not a rare event on the A320. Pilots report it routinely. Not in crash reports, in the quiet, anonymous safety databases that aviation authorities maintain precisely because pilots will only tell the full truth when their names are not attached. The NASA Aviation Safety Reporting System contains hundreds of A320-related submissions describing moments where the automation did something unexpected, where the pilot's mental model of the aircraft's behavior was suddenly, violently wrong. These are not crashes. These are near misses of the mind moments where a confused pilot, in a confused cockpit, made a decision based on false assumptions about what the computer was doing. And then came the moment the world could no longer look away. June 1, 2009. Air France Flight 447, an Airbus A330, the larger, long-haul cousin of the A320, sharing the same fundamental fly-by-wire philosophy and the same automation logic. The flight departed Rio de Janeiro bound for Paris with 228 people on board. It never arrived. Over the black waters of the South Atlantic, in the middle of the night, the aircraft fell out of the sky. All 228 people died. It took 2 years to find the wreckage, and when investigators finally pieced together what happened, the aviation world went silent. The aircraft had not malfunctioned. The engines were running. The structure was intact. The aircraft was, by every engineering measure, perfectly airworthy. What failed was the connection between the pilots and the machine. The autopilot disengaged after ice crystals temporarily blocked the airspeed sensors. A routine event, manageable in any aircraft with a properly trained and situationally aware crew. But in the darkness and confusion that followed, the pilots, faced with conflicting instrument readings and a suddenly silent automation system, lost their mental model of the aircraft completely. They did not know what the computer was doing. They did not know what flight control law was active. They did not understand that their control inputs were fighting each other. Because on the A320 family, unlike conventional aircraft, two pilots inputting opposite commands on their separate sidesticks does not cancel out. The inputs add together. The aircraft tries to do both things simultaneously. For 4 minutes, the crew struggled with a perfectly functioning aircraft that they had become strangers to. The captain, who had been resting in the crew bunk, arrived in the cockpit too late. The aircraft entered an aerodynamic stall. The junior pilot, despite every alarm screaming at him, pulled back on his sidestick continuously, an instinctive, human, tragically wrong response. And the A330's automation, now operating under degraded law, allowed it. The protection that was supposed to make this aircraft safe was no longer fully active, and nobody in that cockpit knew that either. 228 people. 4 minutes. A perfectly safe aircraft. The Air France 447 investigation sent shockwaves through every airline, every cockpit, every training academy in the world. But what it exposed was not a flaw unique to that one crew on that one night. It exposed a systemic, industry-wide problem that had been building for 20 years. Pilots were becoming managers of automation rather than aviators. They were spending their careers monitoring computers rather than flying aircraft. And when the computers went silent, when the automation stepped back and handed control to human hands, those hands had forgotten what to do. Aviation authorities responded. Training programs were overhauled. Manual flying requirements were increased. Airbus updated software. Airlines issued new procedures. Everyone agreed that something had to change. But here is what nobody in any official press release ever quite said out loud. The A320's automation philosophy, the very idea that a computer should sit between pilot and aircraft, filtering and overriding, and deciding that philosophy was not wrong because it failed. It was wrong because it succeeded too well. It made flying so smooth, so managed, so effortlessly automated during normal operations that pilots stopped developing the raw instincts that aviation has always demanded. The aircraft trained its pilots to be passive. And then, in the moments that required everything but passivity, it had nothing left to give them. The machine was safe. The system that surrounded it was quietly, invisibly, catastrophically broken. And pilots, the ones who fly the line every day, who feel the sidestick silence and watch the automation mode cycle and wonder, always wonder, what the computer is planning next, they knew this long before any investigation confirmed it. They knew it in their hands. They knew it in their gut. They knew it the moment they first sat in that cockpit and realized the aircraft was not talking to them. It was only talking to itself. So where does that leave us today? The Airbus A320 family is still flying. Every single day, in every corner of the world, tens of thousands of passengers board these aircraft without a second thought. They watch movies. They order drinks. They fall asleep somewhere over the ocean, completely unaware of the quiet philosophical war that has been fought in the cockpit above their heads for nearly 4 decades. And statistically, they are right not to worry. The numbers have not lied. The A320 remains one of the safest commercial aircraft ever built. Airbus has not been wrong about that. But the pilots who fly it, the ones with the experience and the honesty to say what they actually feel, tell a different story. Not a story of fear. Fear would be simpler. Fear has a shape, a source, a solution. What pilots describe is something far more exhausting than fear. It is a permanent, low-grade friction, a relationship with a machine that never quite becomes a partnership. A cockpit where trust has to be consciously rebuilt every single flight, because the automation has a way of reminding you, subtly and constantly, that it does not actually need you. Airbus, to their credit, has never stopped refining. The A320neo, launched commercially in 2016, brought new engines, improved efficiency, and updated systems. The A320 family today carries more advanced flight management software than anything that existed in 1988. Airbus engineers genuinely believe, and genuinely have the data to support, that every iteration of this aircraft is safer than the last. They are not wrong. In a purely statistical, purely engineering sense, they are absolutely right. But statistics do not sit in cockpits. Humans do. And the human cost of the A320's automation philosophy has never fully been accounted for in any spreadsheet. The cost measured not in crashes, but in the slow erosion of manual flying skill across an entire generation of commercial pilots. Study after study from NASA, from the FAA, from European aviation authorities, from independent researchers, has confirmed the same finding. Pilots who fly highly automated aircraft for extended periods lose proficiency in manual flight. Their reaction times in raw, hand-flown emergency scenarios degrade. Their ability to maintain spatial orientation during automation failures weakens. They become, in the clinical language of aviation psychology, automation-dependent. This is not a criticism of individual pilots. These are professionals of the highest order, rigorously trained, regularly tested, deeply committed to the safety of every person behind that cockpit door. The problem is structural. The problem is that an aircraft designed to minimize human error ended up minimizing human involvement. And human involvement, messy, intuitive, imperfect, irreplaceable human involvement, turns out to be exactly what you need when everything else goes wrong. Boeing, for all its own catastrophic failures in recent years, built its competing aircraft around a fundamentally different philosophy. The 737 family retained conventional control systems precisely because Boeing believed pilots needed to feel the aircraft, needed that physical conversation between hands and machine. There is bitter irony in the fact that Boeing's pursuit of that philosophy on the 737 MAX, bolting automated correction systems onto an airframe that was never designed for them, and then hiding those systems from pilots, led to 2 of the deadliest crashes of the modern era. The Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines disasters prove something devastating. Automation done dishonestly is even more dangerous than automation done arrogantly. Both philosophies, pushed to their extreme, have drawn blood. The real answer has always lived in the middle. In the balance between human instinct and machine intelligence. In a cockpit where the computer is a partner, not a guardian. Where the pilot's hands receive information, not just send it. Where trust is built through transparency, not assumed through statistics. Some airlines have already moved in that direction. Carriers like Lufthansa and Singapore Airlines have overhauled their training programs to mandate far more manual flying hours, specifically to counteract automation dependency. Newer aircraft designs, including Airbus's own next-generation concepts, are exploring enhanced haptic feedback systems, meaning sidesticks that actually push back, that communicate, that restore that physical conversation pilots have been mourning for decades. The industry knows what the problem is. The industry is slowly, carefully, expensively trying to fix it. But for the pilots flying the line today, in the aircraft that exists right now, the friction remains. The sidestick is still silent. The automation still cycles through its modes. The computer still sits between human hands and aircraft surfaces, listening, filtering, deciding. And somewhere in crew rooms across the world, a pilot with 30 years of experience is still quietly hoping his next assignment is not the A320, not because it will kill him, but because it will spend 8 hours reminding him that it does not truly need him to be there. That is the real story of the world's most successful commercial aircraft. Not a story of failure. A story of a machine that was so brilliantly designed to be safe that it forgot to be human. And perhaps that is the most dangerous design flaw of all, one that no software update, no regulatory review, and no accident report has ever fully fixed. Because it was never a bug. It was always the feature. Now here is the question I want to leave you with, and I want your honest answer in the comments below. We are standing at the edge of a future where fully autonomous aircraft, with the 0 pilots on board, are no longer science fiction. Engineers are already building them. Regulators are already writing the frameworks. And the same argument that justified the A320's automation philosophy will be used to justify removing human pilots entirely. The statistics will say it is safer. The numbers will be correct. But after everything you have just learned, after Air France 47, after the silent sidestick, after an entire generation of pilots slowly losing the skills that aviation was built on, do you believe that a cockpit with no human hands is truly progress? Or are we about to repeat the same mistake, only this time with nobody left to catch it? Tell me what you think. Drop your answer below, because this community's perspective on this matters more than any press release ever will. And if this documentary made you think, made you question, made you look at that aircraft window seat differently the next time you fly, then hit like and subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly this. To pull back the curtain on the stories aviation authorities explain in reports, but never tell in plain human words. The next story is already waiting. And I promise you, it is just as deep, just as real, and just as unsettling as this one.